Good morning, everyone. I don't know about you, but I was enjoying the music and I'm feeling pretty pumped. Welcome to day one of Career Bootcamp 2023. This morning's session is titled Staffing Through Social Media. Please note that this session will be offered in English and French simultaneously. To view the French session, please return to the agenda and click on the Dotation par les médias sociaux. Veuillez noter que cette session sera offerte en anglais et en français simultanément. Afin de visionner la session en français, veuillez retourner à l'ordre du jour et cliquer sur le lien Dotation pour les médias sociaux. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I am here on the traditional and unceded land of the Mi'kmaq. The Mi'kmaq people have lived here since time immemorial, and I encourage you to all acknowledge the land that you are joining us from as well. Career Bootcamp is the largest conference in the GC, and the only goal is to support for you to develop your career journey. As we move through today's session, please share your comments in the chat space, or actually, we'll be asking you to ask your questions in the Q&A using the Q&A button for the session today. You can vote questions that you like by pushing the thumbs up, and the FIN moderator will ask all the questions to the panelists according to the most votes. All of the sessions will be recorded and you can go back and check the recordings and the insights at a later date. Like right now, I'd like to hand it over to our moderator, Marcus, who's going to lead us through the session. I'm really excited about this one. Take it away, Marcus.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Jen. So, yep, my name is Marcus. Right now, I am working as an epidemiologist within the STBBI Surveillance Division at the Public Health Agency of Canada. But also, too, outside of just kind of my day job, I work as a caster and host in esports types of events. Moving on to our learning objectives for today, like we kind of talked about at the beginning of this session, it is going to be taking a look at staffing in social media. So we're going to be talking about things like, well, where to look for jobs other than official channels, explaining the importance of promoting yourself and honestly having a good reputation online, and last but not least, generating ideas of who can help you in your search for a change in career, or honestly, even taking a couple of steps forward in your own. We've got a wonderful panel put together for you today. And to start things out, let's talk about our first panelist, which is going to be Christina. So Christina is a junior business analyst in the Partnership Development and Management Directorate at Employment and Social Development Canada. She's currently in Ottawa. Her work focuses on policy evaluation of partnerships and transformation initiatives. In addition, Christina is a mental health advisor at FlexGC, where she works on projects to encourage mental health initiatives within the workplace. Our second panelist for today is going to be Michelle. And Michelle works as a research biologist for the Canadian Grain Commission, focusing on detection of genetically modified grains. She uses social media to connect with her community and encourage positivity amongst her own city, Winnipeg. Michelle has also given a TEDx Winnipeg talk about the butterfly effect of positivity back in 2018. And last but not least, Meenakshi. Meenakshi is a team lead with Shared Services Canada and has worked in the government for over 15 years. In addition to her work, she's involved with the Young Professionals Network and the Diversity and Inclusion Network for the agency. Outside of work, she is also a content creator who focuses on representation, advocacy, and women empowerment. So that is going to be our wonderful panel put together for today. And we have a quick poll that is going to be launching shortly, just to kind of give you a couple of questions that you guys can go ahead and answer. But because we do have a pretty limited time frame, and this is a very important topic, we're just going to try to speed through things as much as possible to try and get a little bit more information out to you guys as much as we can. And on top of that too, if you do have additional questions, we will be sharing a document afterwards where hopefully our panelists can answer some of those questions. And also too, you can get in contact with all of us if necessary. So to start things off, the first thing that we are going to be talking about is, in your recent experience, where are employees finding jobs? And I'm going to toss the mic over to Christina to start us off.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Marcus. Great handover there. So in my experience, I find a lot of employees are finding jobs through informal channels, such as GC Connects, Facebook groups, and LinkedIn as well. More specifically, in my own experience for finding a new role, I found that Facebook groups were quite vital in that experience. especially for lateral moves and finding opportunities or files that interest you and that formulate with your career. So I'm going to ask that the team for the Federal Youth Network share some of these links. There's some really good groups out there, such as Communications, ATIP, there's international groups, policy, just to name a few, but there's many more. So I'm just going to ask that you share that today, just so that you can review and do your own research at your own time.
Okay, perfect, Christina. And Meenakshi, up next, what do you have to say about this question?
Yeah, no, for sure. First off, super excited to be here. This is a very, very interesting, and if I even say bold topic that we're chatting about today. But I couldn't agree with Christina's points. There are a lot of Facebook groups out there that folks can leverage when they are looking for lateral opportunities within the GC. I've also come across other social media platforms such as LinkedIn, Twitter, where we do have some of that flexibility to, hey, let's slide into someone's DM and have a conversation and see if it is potentially a right fit. You know, I always stress that working in the GC, yes, we have expectations from our employer, but also as employees, we have expectations as well. And so it's important to be selective, you know, ask the questions that are on your mind. And what better way to do that than to just slide into someone's DM?
The social in social media. That's a great answer as well. It's so important to just establish those types of connections, especially too if you're looking to put your name out there so that, you know, your resume could be considered a little bit more highly than some of the others. So absolutely. Great answer though, Meenakshi. Our next question that we want to get to is, what is driving the managers and the talent to alternative platforms? We've already talked about this a little bit, but you know, from the employee perspective, it makes sense. But why are managers maybe looking more towards social media? And Michelle, why don't you start us off on this question?
Thanks so much, everyone. It's an honor to be speaking to you today. This is a fascinating topic. I find it very interesting. So what's driving managers and the talent to alternate platforms? I would say that it's really the pandemic. The pandemic has forced hiring managers to pivot and to look at social media as a hiring tool. The way that we interact continues to be more virtual than in person. And traditional processes are much slower than social media. And certainly if you're looking for someone in a timely fashion, then social media is the way to go. With social media, you get a much better idea of a person's potential fit with your team. I'd say that it's a better way to than a formal interview, which might not touch on other aspects of a person's personality. And then as long as the person that is a potential candidate is representing themselves authentically online, then you can get a much better fit for your team.
You raise a great point there. Obviously, you know, we can talk about skills and being able to do the work, but personality does play quite a big factor, especially too when hiring managers are looking for people to kind of fit into their team. So I'm very happy that you highlighted that point, Michelle. And also too, Christina, the floor is yours to answer this question.
Awesome. Thanks, Marcus. An awesome answer, Michelle. Honestly, I'm just going to stem from my own experience. So I was helping out with a hiring process that we conducted not too long ago. And we kind of found that in order to kind of look for new talent, we were driven a little bit to the alternative platforms in a sense that it was a timing and resource capacity and just all above all those facets, especially when you think about pools. We were pulling people from pools, but it has been a while since that pool is around. So a lot of the candidates sitting in that pool were sitting for quite a long time. So we found that the talent that was on, for example, Facebook, were seeking jobs actively and currently. So it was a lot more of a rapid process, and honestly, it made the process a lot more smoother, easier, and then we could see what talent was currently out there versus the talent that might have already sought a new opportunity after kind of sitting there for a while.
That's really funny because, you know, when you talk to somebody, it's just like, oh, how do I kind of go in and get a job in government? It's all make sure your name is in a pool, make sure that you're putting yourself out there. But kind of as these other alternatives are popping up, then, you know, these are different ways that people are leveraging them. So great answer as well, Christina. Before I give it to Meenakshi, I just want to say that don't forget that there is a Q&A function here. And so if you have a question, or honestly, if you thumbs up some of those questions, then once we deal with our core set, we're going to be moving on to the Q&A there. So just keep that in mind as well as we're getting through this. I know a couple of people might be coming in a little bit late. But Meenakshi, did you have something to say on this subject?
Yeah, just real quickly. I know Michelle and Christina nailed it in terms of like, the pandemic has really changed the dynamic of how we are hiring folks today. It's still very evident that traditional ways of hiring are being used. We can't move away from that. But I think, just having this conversation today and talking about very unorthodox ways of hiring people is really going to be that push and that moving factor to have this opportunity to hire in non-traditional ways, to recruit folks in more efficient ways, as we know. And I'm one of them. I have sat in pools and I've swam in pools for a very long time before ever hearing from anyone. So just echoing what Christina and Michelle said, I think this is the time that we can definitely use to our own advantage and help evolve and grow the public service and open our mindsets to trying different ways of working. So big believer in seizing this opportunity and recruiting and finding passionate people across the public service.
Yeah, and actually that's a great way of thinking about it. This is still kind of brand new. The traditional methods still exist, but this is almost like an additional thing to consider as well that can kind of help your resume stand out amongst others and could potentially help you out. So a great way to kind of phrase that, Meenakshi, and a great final point as well. But in today's day and age of social media, you look at school kids these days, they're already on Instagram and everything like that. You know what? Personal reputation becomes a really important factor. And so obviously personal reputation is going to play into how this stuff works. So my question is, how does reputation impact my ability to get jobs in those non-traditional ways? And let's start out with Meenakshi.
It's a very good question. And you make a valid point, Marcus, that I have seen some very young folks on TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter, you name it, every social media platform out there. Reputation does play a huge role. I think the other factor as well is that sometimes social media has this like negative connotation associated to it. While I agree that, we have to be professional and we have to uphold to the values and the integrity of being public servants, I think, we also have a responsibility to show up as our true self and our authentic self, right? And this is why I think it's so important when, someone does slide into my DMs and wants to have a conversation. Well, okay, let's have a virtual, coffee chat, or if we're able to in person, let's talk about who are you, what are your strengths, your weaknesses, and I like to segue away out of the traditional questions. I want to know more about the individual and the person. And so as your reputation plays into this, this is how you learn more about the individual. You understand who they are. You understand their background. Perhaps they come from a different culture, a different ethnicity. And I think this is, again, when I was mentioning, we have to evolve and we have to kind of move away from these non-traditional ways of hiring folks. We also have to move away from the check boxes, right? And so when you get that opportunity to meet with someone and to connect with someone, you have that ability to learn about them. You have that ability to understand, their background more. So I think, it's really important to, yes, maintain your reputation, but maintain who you are too. Hiring managers want to see the real you. There's no facade to it. There's no, there's nothing outside of that. We want to know who, and even your extracurriculars. What are your hobbies? I mean, I full force say it. I have a 9-to-5. I work with the department, but I also do social media on the side, and I'm not afraid to mention it, because it just goes to show what we're passionate about, where our strengths are, where our skill sets are, where our creativity lies, and how we can also bring those skill sets into our 9 to 5. So I think it's about changing the mindset of how we view reputation and social media, and how we can come full circle and really apply that to the type of folks we're looking for in filling those positions.
Yeah, it's coming back around to that theme of, you want to work with people who you jive with. Once again, it really makes such a big difference when you're on a team full of people who all get along very well, as opposed to people who might be very individually skilled but don't necessarily fit together when put into that team environment. So very well said, Meenakshi. And Michelle, what do you think about this question?
I was just going to echo Meenakshi's thoughts about this. I would agree. Personal branding is really important for this. And I'd say that when you're building a personal brand, it's a little bit like curating items for an art gallery. And what are the items that you really want to stand out and that really represent you as a person? Because you should really be real in your personal branding. Authenticity, I'm a big fan of Shakespeare, and to thine own self be true. Really hits home for me when it comes to social media, because you're not going to get good interactions if you're not being real online, and just, obviously still professional, but still at the end of the day, being who you are authentically helps hiring managers make better choices. And that actually reflects the needs of their team so that they can see how you'd fit, because everyone has their own niche to fill, right? So it's just the idea that, okay, you fill that niche, the other person on my team fills another niche. And then it's, being able to collaborate among those people. And I would say, like, even if it's not considered an official part of the hiring process, that hiring managers have likely always took a quick peek at your social media presence just to see if there would be a good fit with their team.
Yeah, actually, here's a fun exercise. If you go onto Google and type in your own name, see what the biggest results are going to be, because especially too, if you're looking for a job, like Michelle just kind of said, a hiring manager could easily just Google you. And then you want to make sure that, if this is coming up here, then maybe I need to clean up some stuff, or if anything, change some stuff around if you want to be able to be found on that Google search, because it does help inform hiring managers. So very well said, Michelle. And now we're just over halfway. I know we're flying through the session, and we're going through, we've got a pretty important question here. And this one is going to be a little bit of a thinker, but this next one is going to be moving forwards with hiring through social media. What are some considerations that need to be made specifically from that hiring perspective? And we're talking about things like accessibility, like equity, because, these pillars have been put in place, but as we move more non-traditional, how do we see those things evolve? And let's start it out. Meenakshi, you can take the mic.
Sounds good. It is a bit of a heavy question, but it's important, right? Where does fairness play into all of this, right? So I think the biggest and most important question I ask myself is, are we hiring based on fairness, and are we being inclusive? And this is where I go back to that notion of checkboxes and checklists. To me, actually, by doing it the non-traditional way, I see us moving away from the checkboxes, the checklists, and taking more intentional actions to exemplify that, we are actually paving the way forward and diversifying our public service, because we're having conversations with people. We're talking to them. We're understanding who they are. I dare I say this, but I will say it anyways. I have been in situations where I've gone through a selection process, and you can see that they're not very transparent, because sometimes they're tailoring it to specific people that, of course, they want to bring onto their team. I am, like I said, I've been through it. I've seen it. I'm sure others have experienced this as well. So for me, doing it the non-traditional way, I feel like I am being more transparent, because I can go to my director, I can go to my manager and say, hey, look, I met this person, and they've got XYZ skill sets. They also have a different set of skill sets that we can add to our team, that can diversify our team, broaden our thinking, our ways of working. So I feel like, again, it's about how we're approaching this shift in hiring people. And so I think in my perspective at least, and I can't wait to hear Michelle and Christina's perspective, but in my perspective at least, I feel like we are being more fair and more transparent this way, by understanding the individuals, by understanding, where they're coming from, and learning more about them, and then just proving that yes, we can have this person on our team because of XYZ. So I like I said, I ensure, and I'm always being intentional with learning about the individual, ensuring that we're creating that inclusive space, and bringing on the people that fit the right qualifications for the position.
Okay, thank you so much, Meenakshi. And let's go right into it. Michelle, you are up next to answer this one.
Again, I would echo Meenakshi's comments there. I would say just specifically for me as a woman in science, I recognize the importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion, especially when you're hiring. Representation matters, and we need to work together to remove barriers to the groups that were traditionally excluded so that they can be included. I think in order to be forward thinking and agile, we need to make these processes more modern and efficient. I remember for myself, when I got my job, it took a very long time. And I think that unfortunately, when you take that long to potentially hire someone, you could potentially lose out on some really valuable talent and people who are just really valuable to your team. And again, with social media, I think it comes down to a better fit.
Well said. And last but not least, Christina, would you like to weigh in on this?
Ooh, it's so well said by Meenakshi and Michelle, but just to kind of echo again, I feel like social media is a tool if it's used wisely. So making sure that you use the appropriate facets when you're seeking out talent, and you're taking into consideration all the different diversity, talent, all the different stories that you may hear, experiences as well, which can be really, can really help out your team. I think that there's also more to be said in the future of what the government of Canada and hiring and recruiting can look like. It's definitely an interesting process, but I feel like there's so many more conversations that can be had into ensuring that all of these diversity, equity, inclusion, that you're including all these different groups into the conversation. I think that that's where we kind of need to kind of maybe focus more of where we want to take social media, and where does the government of Canada, where do we see ourselves in, the next 5 years, for example. Like, talent that's coming in is quite young, and we want to make sure that we're hitting them as well. So maybe there's different platforms that younger talent can be sought out. I don't know, just a couple thoughts to put out there for a heavy hitting question, but yeah, that's all I got. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Christina. And I think one of the biggest things, especially too, with making sure that you reach out and are finding the people, that's what is important. And I think that was kind of the general theme across all three of our panelists, is social media allows you to better understand who is most qualified for the position, A, but also B, making sure that you're giving that opportunity to the people who are deserving of that opportunity, instead of being kind of kept behind various different factors that sometimes can happen in a more traditional job route. So very well answered, all three of you. And now I would just like to say we are going to be going into our Q&A. So thank you guys for submitting questions as well as upvoting. If you take a look at the clock, there's only 7 minutes left in this session. So don't worry. Once again, we're going to be taking some of these questions and we're going to answer it after the fact. That document will be shared on the GC Wiki after the session has concluded. So just make sure to check in there if we don't get to your question. And I'm going to be honest, it's going to be very difficult to get through. There are a lot of really good questions here. But to kick things off, the first question that I would like to bring up is, if we can be hired off Facebook, why would we spend so much time on jobs.gc.ca? And I'm going to start out with letting Christina try to take a stab at this one, just to kind of see there.
Yeah, so just with my lovely peruse through the Facebook groups and being on so many of them, just for opportunities and career advancement, I think it's important to apply to pools and processes, because that's currently what the process is in place to ensure equity and fairness. So making sure, obviously the Facebook groups are great for lateral moves, seeking, opportunities and files that you're interested in, or teams, or even departments, for example. But when you want a promotional opportunity, it is, the way of the government of Canada to be in a pool so that a hiring manager can grab you from that pool to ensure that you're hitting the boxes that they need for their team to meet you at that level. So spending time on Gov Canada can be very daunting, for sure. I understand. It's long list of questions, long exams, and processes that take months and months. But for sure, it is rewarding when you do when you enter those pools, and then you're able to kind of seek those higher opportunities or actings, for example. So definitely still a good idea to keep track of those. But again, to reiterate, lateral moves, files, opportunities, departments is still, something that you can utilize the Facebook groups for.
Well said. Thank you, Christina. Meenakshi, did you have something to add to this?
Yeah, just real quickly, I completely echo what Christina just said as well. I think it's important to mention that, yes, as we are talking about social media and non-traditional ways of hiring, it is equally important as well to get into pools, because it's an experience. And it's an experience to write out the processes. And it's an experience to also reflect on your achievements, reflect on your experience and your time within the public service. And then when you get to that stage of interviews, I can't stress enough how much of a good experience it is to do that interview process as well. Even though there are traditional ways of hiring through jobs.gc.ca, I have seen posts on jobs.gc.ca asking for non-traditional ways of applying. So a video, for example, right? So you could use a video to explain who you are. So again, yes, it's important. Yes, we're still trying to navigate our way through public service and trying to find different ways of recruiting. But I can't stress enough, like Christina mentioned, that for your promotions, for, to solidify where you are in your team, to go through the formal process is extremely important and relevant.
Thank you so much, Meenakshi. And Michelle, do you have any thoughts on this one?
I was just going to add, great answers. It's been fantastic to be on this panel because everyone's just really collaborating really well. I would just say, I would echo their sentiments and say it's still important to participate in the formal processes, because not all postings are available on jobs.gc.ca. You'd find some on social media. And so certainly as far as finding out a better idea of what's out there, just to actually best focus your efforts in an area that is a much better fit for you. So, and then also to just getting experience with, STAR examples and things like that, situation, task, action, and result, I think is really important, because just that can always serve you well in the future.
Okay, thank you so much, Michelle. And just to kind of add in a little bit more to this actual question, keep in mind that right now when we're talking about the future of job searching and where social media can kind of impact that doesn't actually take away from what is currently set in place right now. And I think that's really important, especially too when you're thinking about social media. And all of the panelists have kind of talked about this a little bit, where the traditional ways are still very much in place, and social media is that little addition where you can be that early adopter. You can hop onto that train and add that to your profile to help you get a little bit of an advantage. But that's not to say don't bother applying online, don't bother to go into the pools, because that still is the process that is in place. Once again, I have to apologize. We are just about at time, so we won't have any time to actually answer any of these other Q&A questions on the panel. However, once again, if you go onto the wiki, we're putting together this Google document where all of our panelists are going to be answering the questions in a bit more detail, the ones that we had already asked, but we will also go ahead and try to answer some of these other Q&A questions as well. So with that, thank you so much for kind of tuning into this session, and thank you to our panelists, Meenakshi, Christina, and Michelle. They were all very insightful, especially too as we're kind of in this weird age of technology and social media becoming the main platform. But I'm going to hand it over now to, I believe, Jen from Federal Youth Network to close us out.
Thanks, Marcus. That session was awesome, even more awesome than I was expecting, and I knew it was going to be awesome. So thank you so much to Marcus for leading that wild ride of a conversation. And thanks so much to our panelists for sharing openly and honestly your personal experiences with hiring through social media. I know it is something new in the GC. We aren't all comfortable with it, but we just want to, at the Federal Youth Network, ensure that everyone is aware of it, so that maybe if it's something that you want to try, that you have information about it to give it a try. So we have one final polling question for you. The results of this poll are not going to be shared. And the question is, Alexa, thank you. Was this session a good use of your time? Yes, no, or I don't know. Now, I know you wanted more of this time with us, but that's not the question. Did you like the first half-hour segment of this? If you would like to see more of this information, we have bits of it in other products, and obviously we will be talking about this some more. We also do discuss it in our in-person learning day, which is being brought all across Canada into major centers. So obviously check that out with us as well. So thanks so much for joining today. In addition to this session, later on, we're going to be discussing when you need a selection process. So that did come up in this conversation. So now if you're curious about when do you apply on jobs.gc.ca and when do you need to get in a pool, that's coming up at 1 o'clock. And then at 2:30 this afternoon, we have some great speakers coming to talk about employee-driven career development. I anticipate there'll be lots of hot debate in that session, so you don't want to miss that. And then there's an opportunity to network with other GC employees, which will take place on WonderMe from 4 till 5. The links for all of these sessions are available on the agenda in the V Expo. All of the resources from today's session will be available on the wiki, as well as the recording link for this event, which will take you to our YouTube. So again, thank you so much. I'm sorry it was so short, but obviously it's a hot topic by the number of questions that are still remaining unanswered. So you can expect to see some more content about this from the Federal Youth Network. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming today. We hope to see you at other sessions.